It was past midnight when my phone buzzed, a photo from my mom's friend, with a single message: "Do you really think it's pretty?" I didn't know it then, but that late-night question would change the way I saw her, and myself, forever. The night was quiet, the kind of stillness that only settles after everyone else has gone to bed. The house was dark except for the faint glow of my desk lamp, my laptop still open to a half-finished assignment. I had been scrolling absent-mindedly on my phone, trying to let my brain rest, when it buzzed with a new notification. At first, I thought it was one of my usual group chats. But when I looked closer, my chest tightened a little. It was a message from Claire, my mom's friend. We weren't close. I'd seen her at family gatherings, birthdays, barbecues, the usual. "Hi, how are you?" Exchanges that never went beyond polite smiles. But tonight there was something different. She had sent me a picture. I sat up in my chair, phone tilted toward the light as if I needed to see it more clearly. The photo wasn't dramatic, not staged or glamorous. She was standing in front of her hallway mirror, hair pulled back loosely, wearing a soft-colored dress I had never seen her in before. The kind of picture someone takes when they're debating whether they like what they see. Below it, her message read, "Do you really think it's pretty?" For a moment, I just stared at the screen. The words felt heavier than they should have, almost hesitant, like she had taken a risk by sending them. I could imagine her sitting somewhere in her house, maybe in her living room with the lights dimmed, thumb hovering over the send button before finally pressing it. I felt my heart give a strange little kick, a mix of curiosity and something warmer I couldn't name. I typed, erased, typed again. Suddenly, every word felt important. I didn't want to just say yes and be done with it. That felt careless, dismissive even. After a deep breath, I wrote, "I do. The color really suits you. It makes your eyes stand out." I hit send before I could second-guess myself. For the next few seconds, I just sat there, phone in hand, feeling the silence stretch out around me. Then my screen lit up again. "You think so?" I wasn't sure. "Feels like maybe I'm too old for this kind of thing." Something about that reply made my chest tighten again. There was a quiet vulnerability in her words, not playful, not fishing for compliments, but real. I found myself smiling, just a little. I leaned back in my chair, thumbs moving quickly now. "No way. You look great. And honestly, you don't look like someone who needs to worry about things like that." A pause, then another buzz. "Thank you. I guess I just needed to hear it from someone who'd actually tell me the truth." I didn't know what else to say, not yet. But something had shifted. The house still felt quiet, the night still calm, but now there was this strange, warm electricity in the air. That one photo, that one question, had opened a door I didn't even know existed. The next night came, and I couldn't stop thinking about her message. It wasn't just the photo. It was the way she'd sounded in her words. Quiet. Unsure. Trusting. I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone again, when her name appeared at the top of my screen. Another message. "Sorry if that was weird last night," she wrote. "I didn't mean to bother you." I read it twice, then shook my head instinctively even though she couldn't see me. My thumbs moved quickly. "It wasn't weird at all. Honestly, I was glad you asked." There was a long pause, long enough for me to wonder if I'd said too much, before my phone buzzed again. "Really? Sometimes I feel like I don't know what looks good anymore. Like I'm invisible half the time." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I could almost see her sitting there, maybe curled up on her sofa with her phone in her lap, debating whether to hit send. "I don't think you're invisible," I replied. "At least I've never thought of you that way." This time, her response came quickly. "That's sweet of you to say. I guess I just didn't expect you to answer last night. Most people don't notice these things." I smiled at that. "Well, I noticed. I think you looked really nice. The dress was simple, but it made you look, I don't know, happy." When I sent it, I felt a strange warmth in my chest, like I'd just shared something personal. "Happy?" she replied. "That's funny. I don't think I've felt that way in a while. That one lingered with me. For the next hour, we just talked. About little things at first, her new haircut, a movie she just watched, the weather, but it quickly became something more. She told me about how she'd been feeling lately, like she was standing on the outside of her own life, watching it go by. I didn't just answer, I asked her questions. Real ones. The kind you only ask when you want to understand someone, not just fill silence. What makes you feel like yourself again? I typed. Her reply came after a while, as though she'd really thought about it. Moments like this. Talking to someone who listens. I don't know why, but that message made me sit up straighter. I found myself grinning, my phone suddenly more important than anything else in the room. By the time our conversation ended, it was well past midnight. My eyes were tired, but my mind felt alive, awake. I set my phone down gently on the couch cushion and stared at the ceiling for a while. Somewhere in the middle of those messages, something had changed. It wasn't just a picture anymore. It wasn't just curiosity. It was connection, and it was growing. 2 days passed before I saw her again. It was a warm afternoon, and my mom had asked me to drop off a few things at Claire's house, a couple of baking trays she'd borrowed and some fresh herbs from our garden. Normally, I wouldn't have thought twice about running the errand. But this time, my heart was already beating a little faster as I walked up the path to her front door. The moment she opened it, I noticed everything at once. Her hair was down, loose and slightly wavy, catching the light that poured in from the doorway. She wore a soft sweater, sleeves pushed up to her elbows, and her skin seemed to glow in the afternoon sun. For a second, I just stood there holding the tray, suddenly aware of how I must look: messy hair, a t-shirt I'd thrown on without thinking. "Hey," she said with a small, warm smile, stepping aside to let me in. Her voice was casual, but there was something in her eyes, a glint of recognition, like she remembered our late-night talks too. "Hey," I echoed, my throat a little drier than usual. I followed her into the kitchen, the smell of fresh coffee and something faintly sweet hanging in the air. "You can just set those down there," she said, pointing to the counter. Our fingers brushed briefly as I handed her the herb basket, and the tiny contact sent a ripple of warmth up my arm. It wasn't a hug, it wasn't even deliberate, but it lingered in my mind like a spark. We chatted for a few minutes, small talk about the weather, about the herbs, about how my mom's baking had turned out this time, but everything felt just slightly different now. There was a quiet ease between us, a softness in her tone that hadn't been there before. At one point, she laughed at something I said, really laughed, head tilted back, hand brushing her hair behind her ear, and for a moment I just watched her, caught off guard by how beautiful that small, unguarded expression was. Then she noticed me watching, and for a brief, charged second, neither of us said anything. The air felt heavier, but not uncomfortable. Just present. Like we were both aware of something we hadn't been before. When I finally left, she walked me to the door. "Thanks for bringing these over," she said softly, her hand resting lightly on the doorframe as she leaned against it. "No problem," I said, but my voice came out lower, steadier. I walked back to my car with the faintest smile, my chest feeling strangely light and tight at the same time. Seeing her in person had changed everything again. Text messages were one thing, safe, private. But standing there, close enough to smell the faint sweetness of her perfume, I realized this connection wasn't just living in my phone anymore. It was real. The rain had been falling steadily all evening, tapping against my window like a quiet metronome. The house felt still, cocooned in the sound of distant thunder. I had just settled into bed, the glow of my phone lighting up the room, when her name appeared again. This time there was no photo, just a single message. "Are you awake?" I hesitated for only a second before replying. "Yeah. Can't sleep." Her response came almost immediately, as if she'd been waiting. "Me either." And then, a moment later, "Can I tell you something without it being weird?" I sat up a little straighter, my blanket sliding off my shoulder. My fingers hovered over the keyboard before I finally typed. "Of course." There was a long pause, long enough that I wondered if she changed her mind, and then the message arrived. I don't think I've said this out loud to anyone, but I don't feel like myself lately. Like I'm just going through the motions. Working, smiling, doing all the right things, but feeling completely invisible underneath it all. I stared at her words for a long moment, the rain outside suddenly sounding louder. I could almost picture her sitting in her living room, knees drawn up, her phone glowing in the dark. I'm sorry you feel that way, I wrote back slowly. But I'm glad you told me. You don't seem invisible to me. 3 dots appeared, vanished, appeared again. I guess that's why I sent you that photo the other night, she admitted. I didn't really care about the dress. I just wanted to know if anyone would notice me. And you did. My chest tightened. There was something raw and unguarded about the way she was opening up, and I felt an unexpected urge to protect that honesty. I did notice, I typed. And for what it's worth, I think you have more presence than you realize. You don't fade into the background, not for me. I imagined her reading that, imagined the way her lips might press together in that small, thoughtful way she had. After a moment, she replied, You're kind. I didn't expect you to say that. I smiled faintly at my screen, my heart thudding a little faster. I just said the truth. Another pause then. Thank you? Tonight. I think I really needed to hear that. We stayed up a little longer, not talking about anything dramatic, just sharing small pieces of our lives. Favorite songs, old memories, things that made us laugh. The rain outside kept falling, steady and soft, like background music that belonged to this exact moment. When I finally put my phone down, I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling with a strange mix of warmth and ache in my chest. She wasn't just someone's friend anymore. She was someone who trusted me with the parts of herself she didn't show the world. And I couldn't stop thinking about her. The day was warm, the kind of golden evening that made everything glow just a little softer. Claire had texted me earlier, asking if I could help her move a few boxes from her garage into the house. It wasn't anything urgent, she said, just something she'd been putting off. I told her I'd be over after dinner. By the time I arrived, the sun was low on the horizon, painting the driveway in gold and orange light. She was already outside, hair tied back in a loose ponytail, wearing a light t-shirt and jeans. There was something effortlessly natural about her, no makeup, just the kind of quiet beauty that seemed even more striking at the end of the day. Thanks for coming, she said, smiling as she handed me a pair of gardening gloves. I promised myself I'd get this done before the weekend, but… She trailed off with a little laugh. I'm glad you called me, I said, pulling the gloves on. We worked side by side carrying boxes, dust rising in the warm air with every movement. Every so often our hands brushed when we both reached for the same box, and each time there was a tiny pause, just long enough for both of us to notice. At one point she stopped to push a stray hair from her face, leaving a faint streak of dust across her cheek. Without thinking, I reached out and brushed it away with my thumb. The moment froze. Her eyes lifted to mine, and for a heartbeat neither of us moved. My thumb still hovered near her cheek, her breath just slightly catching. Thanks, she said softly, her voice quieter than before. I nodded, my throat suddenly dry. We finished the last of the boxes as the sun dipped below the horizon, leaving the sky painted in soft shades of pink and purple. She plugged in a string of small garden lights, and one by one they flickered to life, casting a warm, golden glow around the patio. Looks better, doesn't it? She said, standing back to admire the lights. It does, I said, but I wasn't looking at the lights. She turned toward me then, catching me staring. For a moment, neither of us said anything. The air felt different now, heavier, but not uncomfortable. Just charged. She stepped a little closer, close enough that I could smell the faint sweetness of her shampoo, feel the warmth radiating off her skin. Thanks for helping, she said again, her voice low. Her hand reached out to rest on my forearm, gentle, but her fingers lingered there a second longer than necessary. You're welcome, I managed, my voice almost a whisper. When I left that night, I sat in my car for a long moment before starting the engine. My hands were still tingling where she touched me. It hadn't been a kiss, or anything even close, but something had passed between us under those garden lights. Something that felt like the beginning of a choice. 2 nights after the garden, my phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't a late-night text. "Can you come by? I think I need to talk to someone." I didn't even hesitate. When I arrived, the house was quiet, the lights soft and golden. She opened the door in a loose cardigan, her hair falling naturally over her shoulders. There was a tiredness in her expression, but also a kind of resolve. "Hey," she said softly. "Hey," I replied, stepping inside. She led me to the living room, where only a single lamp lit the space. The cushions on the couch were slightly rumpled, like she'd been sitting there for a while, debating this moment. "Sorry for calling you so late," she said, sitting down and tucking one leg beneath her. "You don't have to apologize," I said, taking the chair opposite her. "What's going on?" For a moment, she didn't answer. She just twisted her fingers together, staring at her hands before finally looking up. "I was scared to call," she admitted. "I kept telling myself it was silly. But I didn't want to keep pretending like everything's fine when it's not." My chest felt tight as I leaned forward slightly. "You can tell me," I said. She nodded slowly, her eyes glistening in the soft light. "I've been feeling disconnected. From myself, from the people around me." And then we started talking, those late-night messages, and suddenly I felt seen again. Like I wasn't just someone's friend or neighbor. I was me. And that scared me, because I didn't expect it to matter this much. I let her words settle before speaking, my voice low. "It matters to me too." She blinked, and for a moment the room felt impossibly still. "I keep wondering if I'm crossing a line," she said softly, her voice almost breaking. "You're younger, and I don't want to make you uncomfortable. I like talking to you. More than I should." I swallowed hard, my heart hammering in my chest. "You haven't made me uncomfortable," I said carefully. "If anything, you've made me feel lucky. Lucky that you trust me enough to tell me this. And I like talking to you too, more than I ever expected." Her shoulders seemed to ease just a little at that, the tension melting into something gentler. For a long moment, we just sat there, looking at each other across the quiet space. No one moved. The soft ticking of the wall clock was the only sound. Then she smiled, a small, fragile smile, but real. "Thank you," she whispered. I wanted to reach across the space between us, to take her hand, but I didn't. Not yet. The air between us felt too delicate, like a thread that could snap if pulled too hard. When I finally stood to leave, she walked me to the door, her expression softer than I'd ever seen it. Something unspoken passed between us in that moment, something we both felt but neither named. A few days passed before I saw her again. The evening was cool when I walked up to her house, the air carrying that faint scent of earth after a recent rain. The sky was a pale lavender, stars just beginning to show. She was sitting on the porch when I arrived, a blanket draped over her lap, a mug of tea steaming gently in her hands. When she saw me, her face lit with a smile that felt different, softer, freer somehow. "I made too much tea," she said, nodding toward the second mug on the railing. "Thought you might stop by." I sat down beside her, the wooden porch steps creaking slightly under my weight. She handed me the mug, and for a few moments we just sat there in comfortable silence, sipping tea and listening to the crickets. The night wrapped around us like a soft blanket. "I've been thinking," she said finally, her voice quiet but steady, "about what we talked about the other night." I turned to look at her, waiting. "I think I needed to say it out loud," she continued. "I've been holding everything in for so long that I forgot what it felt like to just be honest. With myself. With someone else." I nodded, feeling the truth of her words settle between us. "You don't have to hold it in anymore," I said. She smiled at that, a small, almost shy smile. "You know, you've been good for me," she said. I didn't expect that. I didn't expect you to be the one I'd feel this close to. Something warm bloomed in my chest. I didn't expect it either, I admitted. We sat like that for a while longer, the silence between us no longer heavy but calm, like a quiet lake reflecting the stars. Then, without a word, she set her mug down and rested her hand lightly on mine. The touch was soft, tentative, but it stayed there, her thumb brushing just once against my skin. I didn't pull away. Instead, I turned my hand over and let my fingers close gently around hers. Her shoulders seemed to relax as if that simple gesture had been the answer she was waiting for. For a long time, we just stayed that way, watching the night settle in around us. There was no rush, no need for more than this, just the quiet understanding that whatever this was, it meant something to both of us. When I finally stood to leave, she squeezed my hand before letting go. "Good night," she said softly, her voice carrying that same warmth. "Good night," I replied, smiling. As I walked back to my car, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. That late-night photo had started as a simple question, "Do you really think it's pretty?" But it had led us here, to this quiet porch, to this new beginning. And for the first time, I knew it wasn't just about the dress. It was about being seen, truly seen, and seeing her in return.